is hard. It's harder for some of us than it is. Like my cousin is so easygoing and mild-mannered, and I am not. Right? I'm just not. That kind of stuff is really challenging for me, and I work on it all the time. But it is. It's a part of being human, right? Like my kids are really good at apologizing because I apologize to them all the time, right? That's why they're good at it. Not because I demanded it of them, not because I expected it of them, but because I modeled it so often. You know what? I'm really sorry. I yelled at you yesterday. I was really frustrated. Here's why I was frustrated. But yelling at you like that was not okay. I'm really sorry. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, right? Like when it becomes a part of your relationship with the students or whoever it is, it doesn't have to be a big, long, drawn-out thing. It's just a part of who we are, right? And hopefully it's not a pattern that's repeated. I know his model feels a little crunchy, a little kind of out there, particularly those of us that are used to kind of rigid rules, expectations, sticker charts, all that kind of stuff. But I encourage you to look into his stuff, to at least look at his website, if not read the book Raising Human Beings. And I think it will fundamentally shift the relationship you have with students. Because the Plan A process is really, it's power-based, right? I'm an adult, I have the power, you're the kid, you don't have the power. I know how to solve this problem. Here's what we're going to do. And Plan B is all about the relationship. It's about coming together as equals. You bring your expertise as an educator, they bring their expertise in themselves. And those two areas of expertise are valued equally, collaboratively, to work together. So I encourage you to look at that. Oh, goodness. Where are we now? No, I don't. I know you can. What do I do? Where did it go? Back. We're close. So we're near the ballpark? All right, we're close. I'm close enough. So the other reason why I really like his work is, like I said, it's deemed evidence-based practice, evidence-based therapy, evidence-based treatment in California, which is eligible for insurance coverage, right? Like, so it is solid science. It's been verified. He's been using it for over 30 years. If it works for kids in inpatient treatment facilities, it will work for any kid in your school. But the best part is that this, right? Focusing on the problem, not the behavior, right? Focusing on what's going on. If you think about it from a medical model, right? You want to treat the disease, not the symptom, right? Like you can lower my fever, but if what I really need is an antibiotic to get rid of the bacteria in my body, lowering my fever is not going to help. So he's really talking about kind of that systemic, get to the root of the problem, because if you fix the problem, the behavior goes away. But if you don't fix the problem and you only address the behavior, it's just going to keep coming back. So I think it's a more sustainable conversation. And it also acknowledges that developmental delay, because you're expecting the kid to be an expert in themselves, right? That goes back to that metacognition, right? Being able to understand who you are, what works for you, what doesn't. That's a fabulous life skill, right? We all need that skill. So starting to be explicit in teaching that to kids, particularly kids who are struggling, is an amazing gift. But it acknowledges that developmental delay because you're just focusing on who that kid is, where they are in the moment, not what the chart says they should be able to do at that age. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about is accommodations. So support is something where we're teaching new skills, right? We do this all the time. We support all kids in many different ways. But support is specifically teaching. Accommodations is changing how something is done, whereas a modification is changing what is done, right? So my older daughter with ADHD might need extra time on exams, but not always, right? Because she's also bright, so she works really fast, and she hates to be anybody but the first person done, right? So she's got that kind of like drive. So extra time isn't necessarily good for her, but it is a reasonable accommodation. It's something that we think about. Now, my younger daughter, who thinks a little slower, right, has a harder time with, particularly with things like math or things with a lot of reading comprehension, extra time really works for her because her brain just goes a little bit slower. She doesn't care if she's the first one done or the last one done. She wants to get it all right. So she's going to take extra time to get it right. But she's also a dreamer. So in the middle of the test, she may look out the window and think that she wants to be a gymnast, and she starts thinking about her career plan as a gymnast, and then she decides maybe she wants to be an interior decorator, and she starts thinking about how she's going to redesign her room, and then 20 minutes later, she's still on question number 3, right? So for a kid like her, extra time can be really helpful. We don't always have extra time, right? We don't always have somebody who can sit in a room so that she can have that extra time. So other things that we can do are what we call modifications, right? So sometimes, particularly her math teacher or like a language arts teacher would say, okay, so the math test has 30 questions, but I basically have 4 questions for each concept, because that allows me to see, if they get all 4 right on that, I know they understand that concept. If they only get 1 of them right, I know they don't understand that concept, right? So that's why I give them multiple questions for each concept. But for a kid who likes to get things done really fast, but also, might need extra time in an exam, reducing the number of questions may help. For the most part, you kind of have a ballpark idea of how most of your kids are going to do on a test anyway, right? Mostly. You kind of get a sense of who knows it and who doesn't, right? The test is really just confirming what you have observed in the classroom. So to make a modification for a kid might be reasonable, right? Because you might be able to go through and figure out, okay, do I really have to ask 3 questions to measure the same thing? Or for this kid, can I just measure 1 or 2? How can I do that? But it has to be, individualized for the kid, and that's harder. So that's where this, it has to be personalized for the child's specific challenges. So a lot of times, the thing that most students get on standardized exams in the US, sometimes in parts of Europe, is extra time, right? We think extra time solves everything, but it doesn't. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's just the most common one because it's something that we feel like we can give to everybody in a fairly equitable way. So again, personalizing these things takes a little bit more time, but you get a better result out of it. Okay, so some things can be explicitly taught, right? We can teach organization, we can teach planning, monitoring is that kind of self-check of what's going on, and initiation, getting started. So you brought up several of these things earlier about the routines, making it visual, right? Particularly for younger kids, we have the check-in, check-out. These are the things you do at the start of the day. These are the things you do at the end of the day. It's always the same. This one is really important, though. Teaching them to work backwards, right? Remember, now, not now, right? And not understanding that gap. I'm supervising students who are writing master's dissertations, and one of the things that they had to submit in their proposal was a timeline of how they were going to get the work done, breaking it down step by step. I had a student who just really could not figure out what I wanted. I showed her, gave her a Gantt chart, right, they're an engineer, here's how you use this, still nothing. I was like, okay, it's due September 19th. What are you going to do right before it's due? Right? She's like, I probably want to have you look at it one last time. It's like, okay, I need 2 weeks to do that because I've got other students. So now we're at like September 3rd or whatever, right? And I literally walked her backwards. She did it. I mean, I just asked the question, like, okay, well, what do you think you might need to do before that? And what comes before that? How long is that going to take you? What comes before that, right? But she's a student who made it to a graduate program without the skill of being able to do that. But when you ask her to plan it out, it feels like this big, huge thing. But walking backwards can be really helpful in terms of visualizing what that means. Planning. Checklist, I'm famous. I like always have something written on my hand. It didn't help me during Corona because we were washing our hands all the time, so my system no longer worked for me. How far up my arm do I have to write it so that it won't go away? If I write all the way there, I'm not going to see it. That's the whole point. But you know, finding ways, the visual things, anything that you can take from here to here in some kind of external visual way really helps. And I think we do this instinctively for the younger kids, right? And